In the early days of Pokemon Pocket, 18 Trainers was viewed as the for-fun deck that you would play if you were tired of using the same old meta decks every game. But with the addition of some new supporters introduced in the last couple sets, this deck has become one of the most threatening builds in the current landscape. I'm Rose from RoseTCG, and today we're going to take a look at how to play 18 Trainers in the Triumphant Light format. What makes this deck shine is the sheer speed it can tap into in the opening turns of a game. With Articuno and Misty remaining one of the strongest Pokemon supporter duos, if you hit enough energy on your first turn, there's just not much your opponent can do to recover. Historically, Articuno has struggled in the late game where heavier hitters could come back and win games by overpowering Articuno's 80 damage. But with cards like Giant Cape, Cyrus, and Irida now in the picture, Articuno is better at closing out games than it ever has been. The only drawback is that because this deck relies on Misty to get early advantages, early game results can vary somewhat significantly from game to game. The primary attacker and only key Pokemon for this build is Articuno EX. Articuno is a basic water type with 140 HP and the Ice Wing and Blizzard attacks. For 1 water energy and 1 colorless energy, Ice Wing does 40 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. For 3 water energy, Blizzard does 80 to the active as well as 10 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. This combination of decent damage to the active as well as some spread damage makes Articuno the perfect Pokemon to build 18 Trainers around. Moving on to the key supporters, we first have Misty. Unless something happens to drastically change the way water decks are played, Misty will always be a mandatory supporter. Thanks to the potential of energy acceleration Misty provides, this deck is able to operate at full power so much faster than most decks, especially against opposing EX decks. Even though she's not the most consistent, the upside makes her more than worthy of playing. Attaching enough energy for a first turn Blizzard can make any game outright unplayable for opponents. If Misty wasn't enough, Irida's introduction to Pocket has further displayed that water types have the best pool of supporters available. Healing 40 damage from not just one, but every Pokemon with water energy attached firmly places Irida as one of the strongest supporters in the game. The combination of Misty and Irida makes water types easily the best choice to build an 18 Trainers deck around. There have been a few different variants to the 18 Trainers deck so far. In the Genetic Apex format, this deck was built around Zapdos EX, and in the Spacetime Smackdown format, it was Pachirisu EX. But now, with Irida and Misty greatly increasing the benefits to water types, the only other variant worth discussing is Palkia EX. Palkia has really similar strengths to Articuno. It actually does more spread damage with 20 instead of 10, hits the opposing active for almost twice as much as Blizzard, and is a bit bulkier with 10 more HP. The only drawback is that discarding 3 energy every time you attack is a pretty hefty price, so you need to make sure you're securing knockouts when attacking. When choosing between Articuno and Palkia, it really just comes down to which playstyle you'd like to lean into. Since this deck only runs 2 Pokemon, you're guaranteed to open with an Articuno EX in hand every game. This is what allows the 18 Trainers to function as an archetype in the first place, as you're always guaranteed to start the game with at least 1 basic Pokemon in hand. Therefore, Pokeball doesn't see as much play in this deck compared to others. In some games, you might not play it at all if you open with both Articuno in hand. But with a severely limited amount of Pokemon in the deck, it's really important that you always have access to both Articuno in every game. Sustain is the name of the game with 18 Trainers, as you only have one other Pokemon to retreat into in dicey situations. This makes healing cards invaluable, especially for a Pokemon that has decent bulk, but certainly not enough to be content with at all times. Understanding what attacks you're in danger of receiving and healing around them is the most important skill for piloting this deck. With many EX Pokemon being able to hit for 140 or more damage, stretching Articuno's HP to 160 is vital for certain matchups. It's also good for games where you couldn't hit a successful Misty in the early game and are now a bit slow to get things going. Just like with any deck, it's really important to hold Giant Cape for situations where you truly need it. Rocky Helmet has more or less become a staple for much of the meta, as the ability to give any Pokemon Druddigon's Rough Skin ability at any time is incredibly valuable. Articuno's Blizzard attack isn't always going to be enough to knock out opposing Pokemon, even in 2 hits. So having Rocky Helmet available to chip opponents down into knockout range, or scare them from attacking, adds some much needed dimension to this deck. Due to a majority of the cards included in 18 Trainers decks being supporters, Professor's research does lose a little bit of sequencing power in this deck compared to others. However, as the only draw support in the entire game, it still holds its slot as the most relevant supporter. Numbers are everything in Pokemon Pocket, and Giovanni is Articuno's only guaranteed method of getting more of them. With the increased usage of Potion in the current meta, as well as Articuno's ability to chip bench Pokemon down before they come into the active, Giovanni can make a sizable impact in a deck like this. While he's not as consistently useful as other supporters, having one available isn't a bad idea. While Misty and Irida are the only supporters that are core to this deck's engine, Cyrus is arguably the most important card in this deck. The synergy that he has with spread decks is undeniable, to the point where some games feel over before they ever really began. It's safe to assume that around half of the games you'll win with this deck are won by playing Cyrus. One of the more unique inclusions here is Dawn. Admittedly, she's a bit of a win more card with this deck since she really gets her full value after some successful early Misty plays. That said, she makes retreating into a backup Articuno much more comfortable without having to sacrifice time to build up more energy. If you're confident in your ability to navigate early games, Mars is a great card to help press advantages into the late game or throttle an opponent's comeback attempts by stripping them of needed cards. Since this deck only runs 2-point Pokemon, Mars forces opponents to draw only one card after taking just one knockout. This can be really punishing against decks that have more moving pieces than a simple 18 trainers build. The final card we'll look at is Celestic Town Elder. This is a fun card to include as 18 trainers is really the only deck that gets full value out of this supporter. Being able to extend 2 Articuno EX into 3 is really valuable if you know how to play around knockouts and retreat properly. Getting the third Articuno setup can be a bit tricky, but if you're able to hit successful Misties, then this shouldn't be much of a problem. Taking a look at the matchups, this deck functions almost like a single point deck in its ability to take advantage of slower matchups. The decks that it loses to are ones with better type matchups or ones that negate Articuno's strengths. Some decks 18 trainers plays well into are Darkrai EX, Palkia EX, and Gyarados EX. Some decks to watch out for are Dialga EX, Lucario, and Pachirisu EX. If you're looking to play 18 trainers, then here's the list we recommend. 2 Articuno EX, 2 Pokeball, 2 Potion, 1 Giant Cape, 2 Rocky Helmet, 2 Misty, 2 Irida, 2 Professor's Research, 1 Giovanni, 2 Cyrus, 1 Dawn or Mars, and 1 Celestic Town Elder. That wraps up our 18 trainers deck profile. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. Be sure to check out our socials and join our community on Discord too. Good luck in your games, and thanks for watching.